Hey guys, it's Sasha. Donald Trump woke up this morning and chose violence. He went on Truth Social and slapped a new 25% tariff on all steel and aluminium coming in from Canada. But not only that, he threatened a whole lot more tariffs and said that Canada has to submit to becoming the 51st state. Here is the post. Based on Ontario, Canada placing a 25% tariff on electricity, in quotation marks, coming into the United States, I have instructed my Secretary of Commerce to add an additional 25% tariff to 50% on all steel and aluminium coming into the United States from Canada, one of the highest tariffing nations anywhere in the world. This will go into effect tomorrow morning, March 12th. This is now going to become a bit of a problem for the United States. About 5% of the steel used in the United States is imported from Canada. So on the one hand, it's not a huge proportion. It's not going to be a huge disruption for US businesses in the aggregate. But the issue with steel is that not all steel is the same. There are endless, slightly different versions of steel with different chemistries, different properties, different characteristics, different use cases. There is also a lot of different formats of steel. There's sheet steel, again, coming in different sizes, different thicknesses. There's cabling, there's a whole load more, different weave patterns, different thicknesses. So the issue really is that even though only a small proportion of the steel that the United States uses comes from Canada, the businesses that rely on the specific supply chains for their particular needs are probably going to struggle somewhat to find the equivalent supply within the United States, especially at short notice, because there are so many different variants. With aluminium, the situation is actually a lot worse because something like 40 to 45% of the total US consumption of primary aluminium comes from Canada. So all the tech companies manufacturing stuff in the United States, car companies, everybody else that use aluminium are going to get hit pretty hard by this because the United States aluminium producers would need to double their production to make up for the gap currently filled by Canada. And that's probably also not something that can happen easily or quickly. Also, Canada must immediately drop their anti-American farmer tariff of 250% to 390% on various US dairy products, which has long been considered outrageous. I will shortly be declaring a national emergency on electricity within the threatened area. This will allow the US to quickly do what has to be done to alleviate this abusive threat from Canada. If other egregious long-time tariffs are not likewise dropped by Canada, I will substantially increase on April 2nd the tariffs on cars coming into the US, which will essentially permanently shut down the automobile manufacturing business in Canada. Those cars can easily be made in the USA. And this is interesting because the biggest manufacturers of cars in Canada are US companies. They manufacture cars there because there is skilled labor available there that have experience and the necessary qualifications. There are parts suppliers, a whole massive supply chain. There are the resources required like steel and aluminium. And sure, they can move production to the United States, but that's not going to happen very quickly. It will take years to do. Now, it's actually fascinating because Trump is essentially demanding that Canada drops all of its import tariffs from the United States in order for the United States to then consider dropping their tariffs. It's a bit of a Mexican standoff. Who drops their tariffs first, right? And if everyone does drop their tariffs, right, if that does happen, well then that's essentially going to create a completely free trade zone between the two countries, kind of going against the entire purpose of what these tariffs apparently are trying to set out to achieve. And the thing is, NAFTA, the agreement, or the free trade agreement for Canada, US, North America, used to cover almost all products traded between the two countries. The one major exception was food, and Donald Trump is right. Canada had some duties on some specific products to try to protect their domestic industry, but so did the US in reverse. The US had a whole range of overquota tariffs on Canadian imports before Donald Trump became president, before this whole thing started. Peanut butter had 50 to 60% tariffs. Sugar from Canada had complex tariffs based on a fixed amount per kilogram, and then another 50 to 100% tariff on top of that. That was very high. Butter had the same sort of setup with over $1 per kilogram fixed tariff and then another 20 to 30% tariff on top of that as well. Canadian cheese was also under tariffs in the United States. So this one kind of goes both ways. By the way, my Investor Playbook course is on sale this week only. You can get 10% off by using the code SPRING2025, one word, at the checkout. The course is all about how to invest in stocks, how to do analysis, how to read financial statements, how to build models, all of that. The discount expires on Sunday at midnight, so if you want to use it, make sure you use it by Sunday. The link is in the description and in the pinned comment. Let's keep reading. Also, Canada pays very little for national security, relying on the United States for military protection. We are subsidizing Canada to the tune of more than $200 billion a year. Why? This cannot continue. Trump is again using the word subsidize here because the United States buys a whole load of cheap natural resources from Canada, and on a net basis, the US buys more stuff from Canada than the other way around. It's a bit like saying that you subsidize Walmart because you go shopping there, right? And Walmart does not come shopping to your house. The only thing that makes sense is for Canada to become our cherished 51st state. This would make all tariffs and everything else totally disappear, along with free healthcare. Canadians' taxes will be very substantially reduced. They will be more secure militarily and otherwise than ever before. There would be no longer a northern border problem, and the greatest and most powerful nation in the world will be bigger, better, and stronger than ever. Well, yeah, I guess if Canada becomes the 51st state, you're not going to have much of a northern border problem, except maybe the odd polar bear straying, and Canada will be a big part of that. The artificial line of separation drawn many years ago will finally disappear, and we will have the safest and most beautiful nation anywhere in the world. And your brilliant anthem, O Canada, will continue to play, but now representing a great and powerful state within the greatest nation that the world has ever seen. And state anthems are a really big deal. Of course, you all know what the different state anthems of every state are because they are so prominent. Now, I am not American or Canadian, and I'm not going to opine. I'm sure plenty of more qualified people on both sides are going to voice their thoughts all over social media, but I'm pretty sure that the data I have seen so far says that Canadians are not very keen to become the 51st state, so there is that. And it is amusing that this whole thing was posted on Truth Social. There was nothing on the White House website. It's a brand new tariff. It's coming in just a few hours with the main trading partner of the United States, and the way that you find out is by going on social media. We live in the future where major inter-country policy decisions are announced on social media, and diplomacy happens on Truth Social. What a time to be alive. Then a few minutes later, Donald Trump went on Truth Social again, right? And he said, why would our country allow another country to supply us with electricity even for a small area? Who made these decisions and why? Well, the answer to this one is actually quite simple. Americans living in states bordering Canada made the decision because it was much cheaper to go and buy electricity from Canada than from elsewhere in the United States, or compared to building new power stations. That's why. And can you imagine Canada stooping so low as to use electricity that so affects the life of innocent people as a bargaining chip and a threat? They will pay a financial price for this so big it will be read about in history books for many years to come. Now, this is somewhat amusing, and I do see his point. It's unfair to play with the livelihoods of thousands of people who might have to pay more for their electricity. Electricity is very important. It might put those people into some form of financial hardship, but you could also argue that it is unfair to overnight drop huge tariffs that stop US companies from buying steel when there are entire communities in Canada living in steel production cities, or importing cars where there are entire areas where everyone works in that local car factory. And those guys will be losing their jobs over in Canada. They won't have money to pay rent, not money to feed their kids. I would say that all trade wars, very aggressive trade wars like this, with no notice, no planning, no pre-announcement, no planning like on either side, no thinking about it, have nasty consequences on innocent people. To be honest, I don't really see the huge distinction here. In fact, paying a higher price for electricity seems a bit less extreme than potentially losing your entire livelihood overnight, an entire city having their business being wiped out, not being able to support families. And I think that's probably on par. The stock market it was roughly flat when the market opened. But then, after Trump went and did his posting on Truth Social, it turned red again as he announced the new tariffs. The S&P 500 is down another 1.4% as I'm recording this video after dropping 2.6% yesterday. Tech stocks are having a slightly better day after getting destroyed yesterday, but banks are red, healthcare, home improvements and airlines are all pretty red. So the story goes on. It's only Tuesday, but we've already had more tariffs. The stock market is down 4% this week so far, and everyone on social media is slinging mud at each other, of course. Remember, go and get your 10% discount for the Investor Playbook course. Use the code SPRING2025, one word, at the checkout to get the discount. This discount code expires on Sunday at midnight. The link is in the description and the pinned comment. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later.